Before we begin, if you love stories of resilience, revenge, and triumph, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss the rest of this journey. Hello, my name is Clarence Whitmore. I'm 64 years old. And today, I want to share a story, my story, one that has haunted me, motivated me, and ultimately gave me a sense of justice I never imagined possible. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. Life was simple, modest, filled with routine. I worked hard all my life, raised my children, cared for my family, and did everything society expected of me. By the time I reached my early 60s, I thought I had seen it all. I thought I knew what respect and loyalty looked like. But I was wrong. It all started innocently enough. I had recently retired from a career I had dedicated over 40 years to. People I once considered colleagues and friends, well, they began to treat me differently. They laughed. Yes, laughed. My age became a punchline, my experience dismissed as irrelevant, and my voice often ignored in meetings, gatherings, even casual conversations. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that perhaps I was being too sensitive, that maybe the world was changing and I had to adapt. But there were moments, so many moments, that cut deeper than any words could describe. One particular afternoon, I was invited to a reunion with my old colleagues. The room was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and memories being shared. I walked in, proud of my accomplishments, eager to reconnect. But within minutes, I realized I wasn't welcome. Not really. Whispers followed me wherever I went. Jokes were made about my age. Clarence, are you sure you can keep up with us? Or, don't strain your old bones trying to remember the names. I smiled politely, pretending not to hear them. Inside, my heart was heavy, my pride wounded. For years, I had given my all to my profession, mentoring countless people, guiding projects, teaching younger employees how to navigate challenges. And now I was invisible. A relic, they joked. But something inside me shifted that day. I realized that I had a choice. I could continue being ignored, laughing it off like some outdated man, or I could take control and teach those who mocked me a lesson they would never forget. It started slowly. I began observing people, not in a creepy way, but attentively. I watched how they operated, who they trusted, who they leaned on for advice. I paid attention to patterns, habits, small weaknesses, and quietly, I started formulating a plan. I won't lie, revenge isn't an easy path. It requires patience, restraint, and a clear mind. And at my age, people thinking I was slow or forgetful, I hadn't changed. No one expected the older man to change, the one they laughed at, to be caught in the next few months of his life decisions. One of the first targets of my plan was Derek, a man who had mocked my age the most openly. Derek prided himself on being young, successful, and charming, the type everyone wanted to please. He loved to make others feel small to make himself feel big. I remembered every sarcastic moment, every sneer, every moment he made me feel invisible. I didn't act rashly. I didn't confront him publicly. Instead, I began to quietly gather information. I learned about his business deals, his habits, his weaknesses. I discovered that Derek had recently invested in a series of high-risk projects he boasted about in meetings, claiming he had an instinct for success that none of us older people could understand. I saw my opportunity. I began subtly advising him on minor things, tips on spreadsheets, presentations, emails. At first, he brushed me off, clearly thinking I was trying to be funny. But I knew the more I inserted myself into his world, the more trust one could gain, and the more leverage I would have when the time was right. Meanwhile, other colleagues continued to belittle me, not knowing that their arrogance was sealing their own fate. I watched as their assumptions blinded them to the obvious. I had more knowledge, experience, and strategic thinking than any of them, and soon they would learn the hard way. It wasn't just Derek. There were a handful of others who thrived on mocking me, people who had no respect for anyone older than 50. I realized this was bigger than just one person. It was a culture of arrogance, one that underestimated wisdom, dismissed experience, and glorified youth. And I decided to become the force that reminded them why experience still mattered. Over the next few months, I executed a careful plan. I reached out to influential contacts, old friends, even competitors of Derek's, all under the guise of seeking advice or catching up. I built alliances quietly, always staying in the shadows, always letting my supposed old age lull everyone into a false sense of security. Every meeting, every interaction was part of the plan. I learned how to position myself where I could influence decisions subtly, nudging outcomes without drawing attention. I found joy in small victories. A project Derek mishandled because he overestimated his abilities, a miscommunication I orchestrated that left a colleague scrambling. Each small triumph gave me confidence, and the anticipation of the final reveal kept me focused. During this time, my personal life flourished in quiet ways too. My family noticed a change in me. I was no longer bitter or resentful outwardly. Instead, I was patient, calm, and strategic. My grandchildren adored spending time with me, hearing stories of the past, and learning lessons not just about life but about resilience and intelligence. In a way, I had become younger at heart even as the world insisted I was old. One evening, at another gathering with colleagues, I saw the perfect moment. Derek was preparing for a big presentation that would determine a major contract. Everyone was excited, expecting him to shine and further cement his reputation. I was there, quietly observing, helping where I could without being noticed. As Derek began his presentation, I watched the room closely. I had subtly planted a few pieces of information, nudged a couple of influential clients, and ensured certain details were misrepresented, not in a malicious way, but in a way that revealed overconfidence. Derek faltered. He stumbled over facts, forgot key figures, and tried to cover mistakes with charm. By the end, the room was silent, and I could see the disbelief in his eyes. For the first time, the arrogance that once seemed untouchable cracked. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Revenge isn't always about causing pain. Sometimes it's about proving your worth, reclaiming respect, and showing the world that age does not diminish intelligence, strategy, or capability. I could see the whispers, the looks exchanged among colleagues. They finally understood that the man they laughed at, the one they dismissed, was the same one who had orchestrated a subtle, flawless plan that they could neither anticipate nor comprehend fully. From that day forward, things changed. People treated me differently, not with fear, but with respect. My voice was heard, my advice valued, and the laughter that once haunted me became a distant memory. This is only the beginning of my story. The events I've shared so far were just the first part of a journey that would redefine relationships, reshape perceptions, and ultimately leave those who mocked me speechless. After that first victory, I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and calm. For years, I had endured ridicule, invisibility, and subtle humiliation. But now I realized I had the tools to not just reclaim my dignity, but so in a way that lasted forever. My name is Clarence Whitmore, 64 years old, and for the first time in years, I felt a fire that I thought had been lit. I started to notice more than just Derek's reputation. Other colleagues, people who once mocked me for weakness, were suddenly acting differently. Some avoided eye contact. Others tried to seek my advice with confidence. It was subtle, but it was noticeable. The very people who had laughed at me, who had assumed I was past my prime, were now cautiously measuring every interaction with me. It was during a late afternoon at the office when I realized how powerful patience and observation could be. I was reviewing some old project files in the corner, quietly making notes, when Samantha Reed, one of the younger managers, approached me. She had always been dismissive, quick to brush off my suggestions, and often made jokes about how cute it was that the old man had opinions. "Clarence," she said, trying to sound casual, "I was wondering if you could take a look at these figures. I want to make sure everything adds up before the client presentation tomorrow." I smiled, a calm, almost imperceptible smile. "Of course, Samantha. Let's review them together." As we went through the numbers, I noticed a few intentional discrepancies, small enough to be believable, but enough to create slight confusion if left unchecked. Samantha had no idea I had already prepared for this. It was all part of the unfolding plan. I guided her subtly, allowing her to take credit for catching the errors, while reinforcing the idea that my experience was indispensable. It was fascinating to watch the shift in behavior. By the end of the day, Samantha's attitude had changed. She looked at me with a mixture of respect and uncertainty, the kind that says, "I misjudged you." Moments like these fueled me. Not anger, not bitterness, just the satisfaction of proving that age did not equate to irrelevance. Around this time, my family began noticing my renewed energy. My grandchildren would sit for hours, listening to stories of the past, the strategies I used to navigate challenges both personal and professional. My children often said, "Dad, you seem different. Happier, sharper somehow." And they were right. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in decades. But the real test was yet to come. Derek had learned the hard way not to underestimate me, but he was arrogant enough to believe he could still regain control. And so the next phase of my plan began. It was a company gala, an annual event where awards were handed out, deals were celebrated, and reputations were solidified. Derek was confident, overconfident, as usual. He strutted in, shaking hands, laughing, and making jokes at my expense, just like he always did. "Clarence, still alive and kicking, huh? Don't strain yourself keeping up tonight." I didn't react. I let him continue, allowing him to think he had the upper hand. But inside, I was preparing. I had spent weeks quietly gathering evidence of his mismanagement, inconsistencies in his project reports, and even subtle lapses in his public conduct. This was the moment where it would all culminate. The evening progressed, speeches were made, and the crowd's attention slowly focused on Derek as he approached the podium to accept a supposedly prestigious award. I watched quietly from the side, my calm demeanor masking the anticipation coursing through me. As Derek began his speech, I noticed the small details I had orchestrated begin to take effect. A few key slides were slightly altered, not enough to be noticed immediately, but enough to make his story fall apart under scrutiny. A client in the front row raised questions I had subtly prompted him to anticipate, catching him off guard. Derek faltered, stumbling over figures, trying to explain inconsistencies, and his charm, his usual armor, was slipping. The room went silent. Every eye was on him, every mind processing the cracks in the narrative he had so confidently presented. I could feel the tension, the disbelief, and the quiet realization spreading across the audience. Derek's arrogance had met its match. And it wasn't brute force nor loud confrontation. It was subtle, patient, and strategic qualities that age had honed in me. When the speech ended, Derek walked off the stage, red-faced, fumbling with his notes. The whispers started, soft at first, then growing louder. People who once laughed at me were now whispering, "How did he know? Clarence, he planned everything?" I never expected. I smiled inwardly, a quiet triumph. It wasn't about public humiliation. It was about recognition, about proving that wisdom, patience, and experience hold a power that arrogance often underestimates. In the weeks following that gala, the dynamics shifted dramatically. Derek avoided making jokes at my expense. Samantha and even others who had dismissed me now sought my advice. Meetings that once ignored my contribution became spaces where voice carried weight. And the satisfaction wasn't just in seeing health. It was in realizing that I had regained myself, confidence, and my dignity. But revenge is not only about proving it's about transformation, personal and relational. I found myself more empathetic, more understanding of human flaws, and more patient. I became a mentor, not just professionally, but personally, showing younger colleagues how experience, patience, and strategic thinking could guide decisions and actions. One evening, as I sat with my grandchildren, they asked me, "Grandpa, why did people treat you badly before? You're so smart and kind." I paused, thinking carefully. "Sometimes, people judge others by appearances or age," I said. "They forget that wisdom isn't always loud. It's quiet, steady, and it often takes time to be recognized. But never let anyone make you feel less than you are." Their eyes sparkled, and in that moment, I realized my revenge wasn't just for me. It was a lesson for everyone around me. Respect, dignity, and intelligence aren't tied to age. And proving that, while fulfilling for my pride, was ultimately about leaving a legacy of strength and wisdom. Now, I want to share one final aspect before we continue. the psychological shift that took place in me. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. Instead, I became strategic, patient, and resilient. I realized that revenge isn't about cruelty. It's about justice, about reclaiming your rightful place, and about demonstrating the value you bring to the world, no matter your age. And while Derek, Samantha, and the others had to face the reality of underestimating me, I faced something more important, a renewed sense of self-worth. Every plan, every subtle maneuver, every careful observation contributed not to harm, but to the demonstration that age and wisdom are powerful allies. If you're enjoying this story, and you want to hear the rest of my journey, how I transformed not just my professional world but also reshaped relationships and left everyone truly speechless, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because at 64, I had learned something vital. The world may laugh at you for being older, for being different, for not fitting in. But with patience, strategy, and resilience, the laughter eventually fades, and respect, understanding, and triumph take its place. As I reflect on everything that happened, I realize how much life had shifted in just a few months. I am Clarence Whitmore, 64 years old, and the journey from being laughed at to commanding respect was more transformative than I could have imagined. After the gala, the dynamics at work had undeniably changed. Derek Larson, who had once mocked me relentlessly, now approached me cautiously, almost deferentially. Samantha Reed, too, who had initially been dismissive, now sought guidance in ways that felt both respectful and sincere. Even other colleagues, some who had been neutral observers, now included me in critical conversations, valuing my insight. It was a subtle, yet profound change. No one could ignore the quiet strength and strategy one had demonstrated. But the most rewarding aspect was not simply seeing them humbled. It was seeing my own confidence restored, my self-respect solidified, and the knowledge that I had faced ridicule and emerged victorious. There's an odd sense of power in being underestimated. People think they see the limits of your abilities, only for you to surpass their expectations in ways they never anticipated. Over the years, I had seen this in others and had always admired it. But now, living it firsthand, I understood the nuances, the patience, the careful observation, and the measured actions required to ensure the outcome is precise and undeniable. I continued my work with renewed purpose. Meetings that had once bored me now became opportunities to showcase subtle leadership, to guide discussions, and to offer insights that, while appearing effortless, were rooted in decades of experience. I noticed how younger colleagues who had previously dismissed my input now turned to me for guidance, impressed by not only my knowledge but also my ability to navigate complex situations with calm and precision. One afternoon, I was approached by Derek, the very man who had mocked me repeatedly. He was polite, almost cautiously respectful, yet I could sense the lingering tension. "Clarence," he said, "I want to apologize for the way I treated you. I underestimated you, and I can see now how wrong I was." I smiled gently. "Derek, it's not about apologies," I said. "It's about understanding. Experience is often quiet, but it has value. I hope this experience helps you see that." He nodded, and for the first time, I sensed a genuine recognition in his eyes. It wasn't just about me proving him wrong. It was about him understanding the depth of what he had done. Beyond work, his personal life changed. My family noticed the change in me that went deeper than professional visits. I was calmer, more patient, and more present. My grandchildren, fascinated by the stories of strategy, patience, and perseverance, often asked me to recount specific moments, the subtle maneuvers, the quiet victories, and the planning that led to these outcomes. I found joy in sharing, in passing along lessons that extended beyond the workplace and into life itself. I also reconnected with old friends I had drifted from during years of dedication to my career. These relationships, previously neglected, became a source of support, laughter, and perspective. It was a reminder that while revenge can be a driving force, the true victory lies in personal growth, restored relationships, and a sense of fulfillment that cannot be diminished by the opinions of others. One memorable morning, I received a call from a client of Derek's who had been present at the gala. She said, "Mr. Whitmore, I wanted to personally thank you. The way you handled certain aspects of the project, it was impressive. We noticed your input, even though Derek did not initially acknowledge it. It made a huge difference. I chuckled softly. "Thank you," I replied. "I just try to do what's right." And that, I realized, was the essence of my journey. My revenge had never been about humiliation or cruelty. It was about demonstrating competence, patience, and the power of experience. By carefully observing, planning, and executing, I had reclaimed respect, not through anger or confrontation, but through strategic action and persistence. Over the following months, I continued to mentor colleagues, offering guidance where needed, and quietly influencing positive outcomes. Derek gradually improved, humbled by the lessons he had learned, and even Samantha grew into a capable leader, enriched by the insights and guidance she had initially dismissed. There were moments when I reflected on how laughter, once a source of pain, had become a catalyst for transformation. Every joke, every whisper, every dismissive comment had motivated me to think, plan, and act more deliberately. The very people who had ridiculed me inadvertently fueled the most significant period of growth and strategic achievement in my life. Outside of work, I focused on personal passions that had been set aside for years. Painting, long walks, reading, and mentoring my grandchildren became the pillars of a life redefined by resilience and strategy. I found beauty in patience and satisfaction in subtle victories, realizing that age provides perspective, clarity, and foresight that younger individuals often overlook. There were days when I still encountered whispers of disbelief, people questioning how someone my age could orchestrate such precise outcomes. I welcomed those moments. They were reminders of the journey I had taken, the patience required, and the quiet confidence that had guided every step. One evening, as I sat in my study, reflecting on the months of change, I realized that true revenge is more than retaliation. It's about reclaiming your power, demonstrating your worth, and living in a way that leaves others in awe, not out of malice, but respect. My laughter had been silenced. My voice had been restored. Even Derek, eventually, became an unlikely ally. He learned humility and the value of experience, which changed not only his professional demeanor, but also his approach to life. He would sometimes approach me for advice, not as a superior or competitor, but as someone who had come to respect the lessons of patience and strategy. Samantha, too, blossomed into a leader who valued wisdom, collaboration, and foresight over impulsive actions. Watching her growth reminded me that even those who initially underestimate you can evolve if given the right perspective and guidance. By the time the year had passed, I looked around at the transformed environment. Relationships that were once strained now held mutual respect. Laughter, once used as a weapon against me, had become a quiet reminder of how far I had come. I realized that the most satisfying revenge isn't about tearing others down. It's about building yourself up, demonstrating integrity, and showing that resilience and wisdom are timeless qualities. And so, at 64, I finally understood something profound. Life is not defined by the laughter of others or the dismissive comments of those who underestimate you. Life is defined by your actions, your patience, and your ability to persevere with dignity and strategy. The respect I earned, the recognition I reclaimed, and the lessons I passed on became my ultimate triumph. If you've followed my journey this far, I hope you've seen that age is never a limitation. Every challenge, every slight, and every moment of ridicule transformed into motivation. With patience, careful planning, and a calm, strategic approach, you can not only reclaim your dignity, but also leave a lasting impact that respect and admiration. And before we conclude, I want to remind you, if you've enjoyed this story, or Clarence's journey has inspired you, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. The story of overcoming resistance, claiming respect, and keeping the power of experience is one that deserves to be shared, remembered, and celebrated. Because at the end of the day, the laughter that we see in its place is a life filled with respect, purpose, and the quiet, satisfying knowledge that true strength isn't loud. It's thoughtful, patient, and enduring. And that, my friends, is how I turned a world that once laughed at me into one that finally listened, learned, and respected. I am Clarence Whitmore, 64 years old, and my story proves that the combination of patience, strategy, and experience is a force that cannot be underestimated. Thank you for listening, and remember, Never let anyone define your worth by age, appearance, or circumstance. Your resilience and wisdom are far more powerful than anyone's laughter.